Far away in the silent reaches of the Andromeda front, the stars burned like dying candles, their light flickering over broken ships and drifting metal. The once proud fleets of the Galactic Alliance had gathered here, but they no longer looked like symbols of strength. Instead, they resembled ghosts of battles lost, scarred and tired, carrying the memory of worlds that no longer existed. Every ship that arrived brought with it stories of destruction, entire civilizations crushed under the weight of the Vrax Dominion's power. For months, messages of distress had filled the void, desperate calls for unity, and now at last, the fleets had come together. From the frozen planets of the Thalari came their crystal ships that shimmered like ice. From the jungle moons of the Kalari arrived their living vessels that pulsed with green light. The reptilian Draknor brought their heavy dreadnoughts, scarred from decades of warfare. And at the center of them all floated the flagship of the Galactic Council, a colossal structure that was part fortress, part meeting hall. Inside that ship, the air was thick with tension. Representatives of dozens of species stood around a glowing map of the front lines. The Vrax Dominion's red markers spread like blood across the stars, swallowing everything they touched. No one spoke for a long time. They had gathered to plan their last stand. But even the bravest among them could not hide the fear in their eyes. Admiral Takar of the Draknor finally broke the silence. His voice was rough. His scales cracked from years of battle. "We have lost the eastern arm," he said, pointing to the glowing map. "Our colonies there are gone. The Vrax took them in 3 days." A murmur spread through the room. Some turned away, others clenched their fists or wings in frustration. They all knew what came next. If the Vrax reached the core, it would mean the end of everything. The Thalari ambassador, tall and shining like carved crystal, spoke softly. "We called this meeting to unite what remains. But what are we uniting for? To die together instead of alone?" The words struck hard, echoing across the chamber. The truth was painful. They had no chance, not with the current numbers, not against the endless swarm of the Vrax fleets that devoured everything in their path. The Kalari commander, whose skin shimmered like green leaves under sunlight, raised her voice. "Hope is a weapon too," she said. "If we lose it, we lose more than our worlds. We lose who we are." But even she could not hide the tremor in her tone. Everyone there had seen the same thing. The Vrax did not stop, did not feel mercy. They were not fighting for victory anymore. They were fighting for survival. Outside the flagship's windows, the fleets drifted silently in formation. Thousands of ships from hundreds of species, all broken in their own way. Some had patches of mismatched metal from scavenged wrecks, others flickered with unstable power fields. Entire crews had been reduced to half strength. There were no reinforcements coming, no hidden armies waiting beyond the stars. This was all they had left. A few of the younger commanders whispered about rumors, stories of a new species on the far edge of the Milky Way. Creatures who had risen from a small blue planet. They called themselves humans. Some said they were fierce and clever, others said they were reckless and wild. But none of them had ever seen a human ship, and no one truly believed help would come from such an insignificant world. The council dismissed the talk as fantasy. They needed real strategies, not myths. Admiral Takar slammed his clawed hand onto the table. "Then we fight," he growled. "If we are to die, we die with our claws, with our fire, with our hearts still burning." His words filled the hall with a faint spark of courage. The others slowly nodded, tired but resolute. They began forming plans, defensive positions, fallback points, communication codes. They knew the Vrax were closing in, their massive armada only days away. In the hangars below, engineers worked without rest, repairing what they could, welding plates over gaping wounds. Pilots sat in their cockpits, staring out into the endless dark, wondering if they would ever return. Every species prepared in their own way. Some prayed, some sang old war songs, some simply sat in silence, watching the stars. When the first sensors picked up Vrax signals, the air seemed to freeze. Dozens of crimson blips appeared on the holographic map, then hundreds, then thousands. The sky itself turned red as the enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace like a tidal wave of death. The Alliance fleets moved into position, but deep down, every commander knew what this meant. They were not just gathering for battle, they were gathering for their final stand. And yet, somewhere beyond the edges of known space, something stirred. A signal faint and weak, but unmistakably alien. A human voice, calm and steady, cutting through the noise of war. The Alliance did not yet know it, but the gathering of the lost fleets was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning of the moment when hope would return to the stars. The Vrax dominion moved like a storm through the stars, leaving nothing but ashes and silence behind. Their ships were black as night, shaped like blades, and they traveled in perfect formations that cut through enemy defenses with deadly precision. When they arrived at the Andromeda front, the Allied fleets could already feel the weight of doom closing in on them. The trap had been set long before they even realized it. At first, the fleets believed they still had time. They thought the Vrax were far away, still gathering their strength. But then came the signals. Distorted messages from the edge systems, warning that entire outposts had vanished without a sound. By the time those warnings reached the main fleet, it was too late. The Vrax had already surrounded them. From the bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship, the commanders watched as red lights filled their holographic map. The Vrax armada had formed a perfect ring, blocking every hyperspace route and escape corridor. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The Alliance ships floated in the center of a massive trap, and the walls of that trap were closing in fast. Panic spread quickly across the smaller fleets. Pilots shouted over comms, demanding orders. Some ships tried to break formation and escape, but they were instantly destroyed by Vrax interceptors. The void lit up with explosions, silent and terrifying. The reality of their situation sank in. They were completely surrounded. The Alliance, once proud and united, was now a cornered animal facing the hunter. Inside the command chamber, the leaders argued fiercely. Admiral Takar slammed his clawed hand against the table, demanding an immediate counterattack. "We strike now before they tighten the net," he roared. "If we wait, we die trapped." But others disagreed. The Thalari ambassador insisted they fall back and protect the civilian convoys still evacuating the nearby systems. The Kalari commander suggested conserving energy for a final stand, knowing that a fight now would only waste lives. Every species had its own way of thinking, and now those differences became cracks in their unity. Old mistrusts resurfaced, accusations flew. Some blamed the Draknor for provoking the war. Others blamed the Council for waiting too long to act. The meeting turned into chaos, voices rising. The fear in the room was almost alive, wrapping around them like the darkness outside. Meanwhile, outside the flagship, the Vrax ships began to move. They advanced slowly and deliberately, as if to remind their prey that escape was impossible. Their weapons glowed faintly blue, like eyes opening in the dark. Thousands of them, each one ready to strike. The sight alone was enough to crush any hope left among the Allied fleets. Aboard the Thalari vessel Silver Dawn, a young pilot named Aaron watched the enemy through the viewport. His hands shook as he adjusted the controls. "They're playing with us," he whispered to his co-pilot. "They could attack already, but they're waiting." And he was right. The Vrax were not rushing. They were patient predators. They wanted the Alliance to break itself before they even fired a single shot. Back in the council hall, the oldest member of the assembly, a scholar from the Oran species, spoke for the first time in hours. His voice was soft but clear. "They are hurting us," he said. "Every move we make, they anticipate. We are not fighting soldiers. We are fighting strategy itself." His words silenced the room. It was true. The Vrax were not simply winning battles. They were playing a game of total control. When the first wave finally came, it struck without warning. 1,000 Vrax ships jumped forward in unison, targeting the weakest sectors. The night sky erupted with plasma fire and debris. The Alliance fleets tried to respond, but their communication networks were jammed, commands delayed. Orders from the flagship took minutes to reach the outer lines. By then, dozens of ships had already been destroyed. The Vrax moved like a machine, cold and perfect. They focused their attacks, isolating small groups and tearing them apart before moving to the next. It was not war. It was slaughter. The Allied commanders tried every defensive pattern they knew, but the enemy adapted instantly. Within hours, hundreds of ships were gone, and the space between the stars was filled with drifting wrecks and broken hopes. On board the Kalari command ship Verdant Spear, the captain shouted over the explosions, "Hold your ground. We fight for our worlds." Her voice echoed across the comms, but deep inside, Even she knew the truth. They could not win this battle. Every second felt borrowed, every victory meaningless against such overwhelming force. As the hours passed, the Alliance fleets were pushed closer and closer to the center. The Vraks tightened their grip like a closing fist, trapping the survivors in a shrinking sphere of fire. The commanders realized that if they did nothing, they would all be wiped out together. But even now, they refused to surrender. They would rather fall in battle than kneel to the Vraks. In the chaos, the flagship sensors picked up something strange. A faint signal coming from deep space. It was not Vraks, nor any known ally. It flickered irregularly, as if trying to break through interference. The technicians worked frantically to decode it. For a moment, they thought it was just static, but then a few words became clear. A voice, human in tone, speaking with calm authority. No one in the room recognized the language, but the translator began to form fragments. Hold your line. Help incoming. Do not lose hope. The commanders looked at one another in disbelief. Could it be? Could another fleet be on its way? But they dismissed the thought quickly. There was no time for dreams, not in the middle of death. Yet somewhere, deep in the hearts of those who heard that faint voice, a spark flickered. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. As the Vraks continued to close in and the Allied ships prepared for one final desperate stand, that tiny spark of hope refused to die. It whispered through the comms, through the noise of battle, through the fear and the fire. And though no one knew it yet, the tide of the war was already beginning to turn. Far beyond the front lines, in the outer edges of the Milky Way, the name of humanity began to appear in the data streams of the galaxy's surveillance networks. The species was young, barely known, and their technology seemed simple compared to the ancient fleets of the Thalari, the Draknor, and the Kalari. Yet despite their small numbers and limited resources, whispers of human bravery and strange, unpredictable tactics spread quietly among the galactic councils, almost like a rumor. Within the flagship of the Allied fleets, commanders pored over reports and sensor readings, trying to make sense of the mysterious signal that had reached them. The voice was faint, but it carried a distinct cadence and confidence that immediately set it apart from the panicked comm chatter that surrounded them. Analysts ran comparisons, trying to match it to known species, and eventually came to the same shocking conclusion. Humans, a species many thought irrelevant in interstellar politics, were out there somewhere, and they were reaching out. The first reaction was disbelief, mixed with frustration. Admiral Takar slammed his claws against the table. Humans? A species with barely a few dozen ships is supposed to help us against the Vraks? He growled, his voice echoing in the command chamber. Others murmured agreement, their expressions skeptical. They had heard of humans before, of course. Scouts reported strange skirmishes near the Sol system, stories of reckless but effective maneuvers, but no one had seen them fight a war of this scale. No one knew if they could survive even a single Vrax attack. The Thalari ambassador, her crystalline frame reflecting the glow of the holographic map, spoke softly. "We have no choice but to consider it," she said. "If this is truly a species capable of changing outcomes, we cannot dismiss it. The Vraks do not wait, and neither can we." Her calm reasoning carried weight, though uncertainty still clouded the room. Everyone wanted hope, but hope felt fragile, like a star about to die. Meanwhile, human ships were moving at speeds that defied conventional understanding. Their fleet was small, almost laughable by galactic standards, barely a few dozen vessels, but their formation was precise, almost surgical. They traveled through uncharted hyperspace corridors, avoiding known patrols and sensors, a method no other species had mastered. The humans were not reckless in the sense of foolishness. They were bold, intelligent, and willing to take risks that others would never consider. The first human vessel appeared on the sensors like a blip in the void, a single dot moving faster than anything the aliens had seen. And then another and another, each one following the lead of the first. The analysts in the flagship watched in awe as the small human fleet maneuvered into positions that seemed impossible, slicing through the sensor gaps and approaching the Vrax perimeter without detection. Inside the command center of the humans, their captain, a woman named Commander Elena Royce, studied the star maps with steady eyes. "We are late," she said, her voice calm and determined, "but we can still make a difference." Prepare the fleet. Target the flanks. Disrupt their formation, not engage head-on. Her crew moved quickly, following her precise orders, each member trained to anticipate not just the enemy, but also the unexpected. The humans relied on improvisation and intuition as much as on firepower, a combination that no other species could predict. Back in the Council flagship, a young Kalari officer leaned over the console, eyes wide. Could they really do it? She whispered to her partner. Her voice trembled with a mixture of fear and hope. The idea that a small, unknown species could arrive and change the outcome of a battle that seemed hopeless was difficult to grasp. Yet every sensor reading confirmed the humans were real, and they were coming. The Vrax, meanwhile, had no idea that another player was entering the field. They were confident in their trap, their strategy, their numbers. They did not account for unpredictability, for ingenuity, for the human willingness to take risks no one else would. Their armada moved closer, unaware that the small blips approaching the perimeter would soon force them to rethink everything they assumed about the galaxy. Rumors of humanity's capabilities began spreading through the alien fleets. Even commanders who had dismissed them as insignificant could not ignore the reports of small strikes in previous conflicts. Where humans had defeated overwhelming odds with clever tactics and bold maneuvers, their reputation was built on audacity, on thinking outside the rigid strategies that most species clung to. They were a wild card in the truest sense, and now they were about to enter the largest battle the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Tikar paced the command room, his scales reflecting the dim light. If humans are what they claim to be, they may be our only chance, he admitted reluctantly. The idea was unsettling, to rely on a species so young and untested, but the evidence was undeniable. The Vrax had surrounded them, and without help, the fleets would be destroyed. Humanity represented both risk and hope, the only possible factor that could change the tide. As the alien fleets waited, tension grew unbearable. Every ship crew stared into the void, watching the sensor feeds, hoping to glimpse the humans as they approached. Children of distant colonies held their breath. Elders prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Soldiers checked their weapons. Engineers reinforced shields. The air was electric with anticipation and dread. Every being aboard those ships felt the weight of the moment. Then, for the first time, the human fleet appeared fully on the visual sensors, sleek and compact vessels with designs unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Their engines glowed brightly, leaving streaks of light across the void as they moved with precision and speed. Every movement was calculated yet daring, a balance between discipline and audacity. The alien commanders stared in disbelief, realizing that this unknown species had not only found them, but had also positioned itself to strike exactly where it would hurt the Vrax the most. The humans transmitted a signal to the Allied fleets, simple and clear. We are here. Follow our lead. Fight with us. For the first time in months, the alien fleets felt something they had not felt since the start of the war. Hope. It was fragile, but it burned brighter than any weapon. And it reminded every commander, pilot, and soldier that even in the darkest hour, courage and unity could still change the course of history. And as the humans moved closer, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if this small, unexpected force could truly turn the tide against the unstoppable Vrax dominion. The Allied commanders stared at the approaching human fleet, their disbelief slowly giving way to cautious hope. For weeks, they had been trapped, surrounded by the Vrax Dominion's relentless armada, watching as their numbers dwindled, their fleets damaged, and morale shattered. Now, a new variable entered the battle, one that could change everything, but it came with uncertainty, and uncertainty terrified them. Inside the Galactic Council flagship, debates raged once more. This time, the focus was not on fleeing or defensive formations, but on whether to trust humanity. Admiral Tar's claws drummed impatiently on the command table as he demanded immediate integration of the human fleet into their strategy. "We have no time for hesitation," he barked. "They are our only chance." Some of the older commanders hesitated, skeptical of relying on a species so young, whose combat experience they barely understood. The Talari ambassador, her crystalline form catching the dim light of the room, reminded the Council of humanity's past exploits. Small-scale but brilliant acts of ingenuity in skirmishes and planetary defenses. We cannot ignore what they have achieved, she said softly. They see the battlefield differently. That is their strength. Their unpredictability is a weapon against the Vrax. Her words, calm and measured, slowly swayed the council, though tension still lingered like a shadow over the room. Meanwhile, in the human fleet, Commander Elena Royce studied the Alliance's positions through her viewport, her crew moving with precision as they prepared for the approach. Every movement was calculated to gain maximum advantage while minimizing exposure to the Vrax. Royce's plan relied on breaking through the Vrax's flanks, striking where the enemy least expected. She knew the alien commanders were hesitant, but she also knew that hesitation would cost lives. She had to act decisively to force the aliens to follow her lead. The humans' reputation for fearlessness and clever tactics was not just myth. It was earned through countless battles on distant worlds where they had faced enemies far stronger than themselves. Their success came not from sheer numbers, which were always small, but from innovation, courage, and the willingness to take calculated risks. The aliens, trained to follow rigid procedures, found the human style disorienting and unnerving. But slowly, that disorientation became hope. As the human fleet moved into position, the Vrax continued their relentless approach, unaware of the newcomers. Their confidence in their trap was absolute. They believed they had annihilated every opposition, underestimated the ability of a single species to make a difference. This overconfidence was exactly what the humans relied upon, exploiting the predictability of the Vrax to strike precisely where it would hurt most. The alien fleets, watching from their positions, began to notice the humans' maneuvers. Small groups of human ships moving with incredible speed, weaving between asteroid fields, using gravitational anomalies, and executing attacks that no other species would dare attempt. The humans were daring, almost reckless in appearance, but every strike was calculated. Every maneuver designed to force the Vrax into a vulnerable formation. Commander Royce issued orders calmly, directing her ships to form attack vectors that cut across the Vrax's lines. Isolated enemy vessels were targeted first, creating confusion and breaking communication chains. Her crew executed flawlessly. Their coordination was unmatched, a perfect mix of discipline and intuition. While the Vrax expected a standard assault, the humans delivered a dynamic, shifting battle pattern that the Dominion could not anticipate. Back on the Council flagship, the alien commanders began to see the potential of humanity. Even the most skeptical of them could not deny the effectiveness of the humans' actions. Slowly, hope replaced despair, and fear began to transform into courage. They realized that humanity's unpredictability could compensate for the numerical disadvantage they faced. Their willingness to act decisively and take risks inspired the alien fleets, who had long been paralyzed by caution. The Thalari ambassador turned to Admiral Tikar. "They are showing us a new way to fight," she said. "Perhaps this is what we have been waiting for all along." Tikar's claws relaxed slightly, a spark of relief and determination shining in his eyes. The Council quickly adjusted their strategy, beginning to integrate human movements into their overall battle plan. The young Kalari officers, once doubtful, now followed instructions with renewed energy, encouraged by the humans' bold actions. As the combined fleets prepared to engage the Vrax, tension remained high, but a shared sense of purpose began to take hold. No longer did the commanders feel entirely trapped. The humans had given them a path forward. A sense of unity formed as alien pilots and crew witnessed the humans' courage and skill firsthand. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the willingness of the humans to confront danger head-on reminded everyone why they had been fighting at all. The Vrax, still unaware of the new threat, moved with deadly precision toward the center of the trapped alliance. Confident in their dominance, they continued their relentless approach. But every human maneuver disrupted their expectations, creating pockets of vulnerability, slowing the Vrax advance, and forcing them to divide their attention. For the first time in weeks, the Alliance saw cracks in the enemy's formation, openings that could be exploited. Commander Royce, sensing the alien fleet's growing confidence, sent signals encouraging them to follow. Her orders were simple, clear, and assertive. Trust us. Move with us. Attack with precision. Slowly, alien ships began to mirror human tactics, learning from their style and adapting quickly. Fear was still present, but it was no longer the dominant force. The humans' presence had shifted the atmosphere from one of despair to one of strategic possibility. Every pilot, engineer, and soldier aboard the Allied ships began to feel it. The spark of hope that had been nearly extinguished was now a fire, illuminating the darkness of the battle ahead. The aliens began to believe that with humanity's help, they could survive the Vrax trap. That belief, fragile though it was, had power. It changed the way they moved, the way they fought, and the way they saw the future. The galaxy, silent and vast around them, seemed to hold its breath as humanity positioned itself at the edge of the battle, their ships glinting in the starlight. Their arrival had done more than just add numbers to the fight. It had introduced courage, ingenuity, and unpredictability, qualities the Vrax could not anticipate. The aliens realized that in the midst of despair, a single species from a small blue planet could inspire an entire armada to stand and fight. And so the Allied fleets, once paralyzed by fear and hopelessness, began to move with renewed determination, guided by humanity's daring example. The Vrax would soon face not just a cornered alliance, but a force fueled by unity, courage, and the unshakable spirit of a species that refused to yield. Even as the shadows of the Vrax loomed closer, the galaxy now held a spark of hope, born from the unpredictable brilliance of humanity. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Vrax trap like a spark in the dark, small but sharp. Their ships glinted in the faint light of distant stars, sleek, fast, and unlike anything the alien fleets had ever seen. The humans moved with confidence, their formation precise yet flexible, shifting constantly to confuse sensors and scanners. It was clear to the alien commanders watching from their flagships that these newcomers were not here to flee or hide. They were here to fight. Commander Elena Royce stood at the bridge of the lead vessel, her hands steady on the controls, eyes scanning the holographic map of the enemy positions. "All units, maintain formation and prepare for flank strike," she ordered, her voice calm, authoritative, and unwavering. Every ship responded immediately, engines flaring, weapons charging, a compact army ready to pierce the heart of the Vrax lines. The Vrax, confident in their surrounding strategy, were unaware that a completely new player had entered the battle. Their vast armada stretched across light years, moving like a deadly tide. But humans did not act like any other species. Their small ships darted between larger vessels, using asteroid fields, gravity wells, and magnetic anomalies to their advantage. Each maneuver seemed reckless, almost foolish, yet executed perfectly, forcing the Vrax to adjust and divert resources constantly. The first human strikes hit quickly, targeting isolated Vrax vessels on the perimeter. Plasma beams tore through enemy hulls, shields flared, and ships exploded silently in the void. The Vrax were stunned. No other fleet had dared to strike so boldly in the center of their formation. Their confidence wavered for the first time, and chaos began to spread among their ranks, even before the main Allied fleets moved to support. The alien commanders, still recovering from shock, watched as humanity's tactics began to show results. The smaller Vrax ships were drawn into traps, their movements predicted and countered. Heavy Vrax dreadnoughts found themselves isolated and surrounded, unable to coordinate attacks. The humans exploited every weakness, every predictable move, and every lapse in attention, forcing the Vrax to fight a battle they had assumed would be easy. On the human bridge, Royce's crew moved like a single mind. Eyes and sensors tracked hundreds of variables at once. The positions of enemy ships, the flanks of the Allied fleets, the trajectory of incoming projectiles, and the status of their own vessels. Orders were given, followed instantly, and adjusted in real time. Each human ship acted independently but as part of a coordinated whole, a living network of strategy, precision, and daring. As the humans pressed their attack, alien fleets began to follow, tentative at first. Then, with growing confidence, inspired by the humans' audacity and effectiveness, ships that had hesitated for weeks now moved forward, breaking out of defensive formations to join the assault. The combined firepower, though smaller than the Vrax's, was more flexible, unpredictable, and coordinated in a way the enemy could not anticipate. The Vrax responded with fury, redirecting their firepower toward the humans, believing that a small fleet could be destroyed quickly. But the humans had already anticipated this. Their ships moved in patterns designed to draw attacks away from key targets, using shields, energy fields, and rapid maneuvers, they minimized losses while maximizing the chaos within the Vrax lines. Every strike, every movement seemed to have a purpose, and the aliens watching could not help but be amazed. From the Council flagship, Takar and the other commanders observed the transformation of the battlefield. Once they had been trapped, surrounded, and paralyzed by fear, but now momentum was shifting. Every Vrax unit that fell weakened the cohesion of their massive fleet. Confusion spread like wildfire, and small opportunities appeared for the previously cornered alien fleets to strike back. The humans were not just adding numbers, they were changing the very shape of the battle. Within the chaos, small pockets of Vrax resistance tried to regroup, but the humans' speed and flexibility made them impossible to pin down. Every engagement was carefully measured, yet executed with the audacity that only humans seemed capable of. Royce directed simultaneous attacks on multiple targets, distracting the enemy and forcing them to respond in ways they could not predict. The Vrax, used to overwhelming dominance, were now reacting defensively, losing the initiative for the first time. The alien fleets gained courage as they watched, each slowly coordinating with human movements. Using signals and guidance from the humans, they learned to mimic their tactics, to break the Vrax formation, isolate enemy ships, and attack with precision rather than brute force. Pilots who had been frozen by fear weeks ago now executed maneuvers with new skill, their confidence bolstered by the humans' example. It was as if humanity had brought not just firepower, but a new way of thinking. As hours passed, the center of the Vrax formation began to crack. Isolated ships were destroyed or forced to retreat. Communication lines within the enemy armada faltered. Confusion spread from the flanks to the heart of the enemy. Every successful strike, no matter how small, seemed to ripple through the battlefield, giving the Allied fleets strength and resolve. The humans had done more than arrive. They had created a turning point, a moment when hope became possible. On board the human ships, Royce watched the results with quiet determination, not celebration. She knew this was only the beginning. Every victory, no matter how spectacular, carried risk. The Vrax were vast, relentless, and would soon adapt to any strategy. Her crew, however, trusted her, and together they continued to push forward, knowing that bold action now could change the fate of the galaxy. The Vrax, realizing the threat, attempted to reorganize, but the damage had already been done. Their dominance over the region was no longer absolute. Every movement had to be calculated, every strike considered carefully. They were no longer predators operating freely. They were reacting to a force they could not understand, a small fleet of humans who had entered the battlefield with a daring plan. And so, the battle shifted from a desperate struggle for survival to a contest of strategy, courage, and ingenuity. The humans, small but fearless, had not only broken through the Vrax perimeter, they had inspired the Allied fleets to fight in ways they never had before. What had begun as a hopeless stand now had the potential to become the first true victory against the Vrax. All eyes, alien and human alike, were fixed on the stars ahead, waiting to see how far humanity's bold strike could carry them. The battle had reached its fiercest point, and the void of space was filled with flashes of plasma and streaks of fire. The Vrax Dominion, once supremely confident, was now reeling under the relentless pressure of the human fleet. Their perfectly organized armada was breaking apart, and the smallest gaps were exploited with deadly precision. Every movement of the humans seemed to strike exactly where it hurt the enemy the most, disrupting their lines and forcing confusion in their ranks. Commander Elena Royce directed her ships with calm authority. Split into 3 groups. Focus on their command vessels. Use gravitational anomalies to push their heavy ships off course, she ordered, her crew moving with synchronized efficiency. Every ship executed its maneuver as if it were a single organism, weaving between debris, dodging fire, and striking with pinpoint accuracy. The humans relied not on sheer numbers, which were few, but on unpredictability and ingenuity, exploiting every weakness in the Vrax formation. The Vrax, used to overwhelming dominance, found themselves trapped in chaos. Their command vessels struggled to maintain control over scattered fleets. Isolated units were destroyed before they could regroup, and panic rippled through even the bravest crews. The humans' tactics were so unfamiliar that the Vrax could not anticipate them. Every strike seemed premeditated yet spontaneous, like lightning that always hit the right target. Inside the flagship of the Galactic Council, alien commanders watched in awe as the humans performed maneuvers that no one else had dared attempt. The humans drew Vrax's ships into gravitational wells, then detonated plasma charges to push entire enemy squadrons into disarray. Heavy dreadnoughts, the pride of the Vrax fleet, were turned into obstacles for their own units. Collisions and chain reactions created chaos in the heart of the enemy, and the Allied fleets began to move forward to exploit the openings. The Draknor Admiral Tukar barked orders with renewed energy. Follow their lead. Strike now while the enemy is disoriented. His fleet, once cornered and paralyzed, surged forward. Their weapons found gaps that were invisible just hours before. Shields flared as plasma tore through the void, and the Vrax were forced to react to a battlefield that had completely changed. The humans had not only attacked, they had rewritten the rules of engagement. In the chaos, the smallest units became crucial. Scout ships darted in and out of enemy lines, relaying positions and weak points to human commanders. Fighters swooped around larger vessels, distracting them and opening pathways for larger strikes. Every member of the human fleet had a role, and each action was part of a larger strategy that seemed almost impossible in its complexity. Yet every move was executed flawlessly, a testament to their training and ingenuity. On board the human ships, Royce calculated the next series of attacks, anticipating how the Vrax would react to each strike. She ordered simultaneous assaults on multiple fronts, hitting command ships, weapon platforms, and supply vessels all at once. The enemy was forced to divide attention, spreading their forces thin. The humans had turned the once unbreakable Vrax formation into a maze of confusion and vulnerability. The alien fleets, initially hesitant to act, began to mimic the humans' tactics. Their ships moved with new confidence, striking isolated targets, coordinating with human maneuvers, and exploiting weaknesses that had been invisible when they fought alone. Every victory, no matter how small, strengthened morale. Ships that had been damaged were repaired and returned to the fight, their crews emboldened by the humans' fearlessness and precision. The Vrax attempted to regroup, their commanders furious and confused. They had never faced an enemy that could think so unpredictably. They tried to centralize control, but every command was countered by human strategy. Every diversion intended to trap the humans backfired. As the humans used gravity wells and plasma charges to manipulate the battlefield, even the largest Vrax vessels were forced into positions where they could be targeted effectively. In one daring maneuver, a group of human ships approached the Vrax flagship from an angle no one expected. Slipping through layers of defense, they detonated charges that disabled key systems, forcing the flagship to divert power to shields instead of weapons. It was a bold gamble. And it worked. Isolated Vrax ships around the flagship were immediately vulnerable, and Allied fleets moved in to exploit the advantage. The Thalari ambassador, watching the unfolding chaos, whispered to her officers, "They fight differently. They see the battle as a living thing. This is genius." The alien commanders had never experienced warfare like this. And yet, inspired by the humans, they began to coordinate their attacks in ways they had never imagined. Communication lines that had been paralyzed by fear now flowed efficiently, and fleets moved as one, guided by the humans' lead. Every strike, every maneuver was designed not just to destroy, but to disrupt. The Vrax found their disciplined formation turning into disorder, their advantage over numbers nullified by the humans' clever tactics. Collisions and chain reactions among enemy ships further worsened their position. The humans exploited everything: the environment, enemy psychology, and timing, transforming the battlefield into a dynamic, unpredictable arena. Hours into the engagement, it became clear that the humans were turning what seemed like a hopeless situation into an opportunity. Every move had a purpose. Every loss was calculated and minimized. Every victory inspired the alien fleets. And slowly, the tide of the battle began to shift, from desperation and fear to hope and determination. The Vrax, for the first time in centuries, faced a foe they could not dominate through numbers alone. Commander Royce, calm yet focused, guided her fleet through the heart of the battle. Every action planned, every maneuver executed with precision. She knew that the victory was not complete, but the path was clear. The humans had done more than fight. They had given the cornered fleets a chance, a reason to act, a strategy to follow, and the courage to believe that the Vraks could be beaten. As the stars around them flashed with the chaos of war, the humans continued their relentless assault, their unpredictability, courage, and clever tactics reshaping the battlefield. For the first time in the long, dark history of the Vraks' conquest, it seemed possible that the invincible enemy could be broken, and that the fate of the galaxy might not be decided in despair, but in hope, guided by the fearless hand of humanity. The battle had reached a turning point, and the Allied fleets began to sense a shift in power. For weeks, they had been cornered, outnumbered, and nearly broken. But the arrival of the humans had changed everything. The small, daring human fleet had forced the Vraks to split their focus, creating gaps and weaknesses in a formation that had seemed unbreakable. Now, the alien commanders realized that it was no longer a fight merely for survival. It was a fight that could be won. The human ships moved with precision and confidence, weaving between Vraks' vessels, drawing fire and striking at the weakest points. Their tactics were unconventional, daring, and brilliant, and the Allied fleets began to follow their lead. At first, alien pilots were tentative, afraid of exposing themselves, but seeing the humans' success gave them courage. Slowly, the fleets coordinated with human maneuvers, attacking together, striking in unison, and taking advantage of the confusion they created. Commander Elena Royce directed her forces with calm authority, issuing orders that seemed almost impossible. Divide into 3 waves. Disrupt their command lines. Use the gravity wells to isolate their ships. Keep pressure on the flanks, she said, her voice steady even as explosions flared outside. Her crew executed flawlessly, every maneuver perfectly timed, creating chaos within the Vraks' lines. The humans' ability to adapt to every move the Vraks made left the enemy struggling to regain control. As the Vraks began to falter, the alien fleet saw an opportunity they had never believed possible. Ships that had been pinned in the center now moved forward to support the humans. Combining firepower with the humans' tactics, they struck at isolated Vraks vessels, tearing apart sections of the enemy armada. Every explosion and destroyed ship further weakened the Vraks formation. Morale faltered, and fear spread like wildfire among their crews. The Vraks tried to respond, redirecting their fire and reinforcing key positions. But the humans had anticipated their every move. Using the environment to their advantage, human ships manipulated gravity wells, asteroid fields, and magnetic anomalies, forcing large Vraks dreadnoughts off course, making them vulnerable to combined attacks from both human and alien forces. Every clever strike amplified the confusion and panic in the enemy lines. On board the Council flagship, alien commanders watched in awe as the previously hopeless battle began to shift. "They are doing the impossible," whispered the Thalari ambassador. Her eyes followed the coordinated movements of the human ships and the Allied fleets. "This is more than courage. It is genius." Even the most skeptical officers began issuing orders in coordination with human tactics. Abandoning old rigid strategies and trusting in the humans' bold plan, the human fleet continued to press forward, striking Vraks' command ships and supply lines. Isolated squadrons of enemy fighters were pulled into traps, while larger vessels were drawn into dangerous positions. Collisions and chain reactions spread through the Vraks' formation, creating openings for the Allied fleets to exploit. The humans did not just attack blindly. Every maneuver was designed to force the enemy into mistakes, and it worked brilliantly. The alien pilots, once fearful and hesitant, now fought with renewed determination, following human guidance and seizing opportunities that had been invisible before. Communication lines flowed smoothly, orders were executed quickly, and fleets moved as a coordinated whole for the first time. Even small vessels contributed in meaningful ways, scouting, distracting, and striking at just the right moment. The humans had taught them a new way to fight, blending courage with clever strategy. As the Vraks' command struggled to regain control, gaps appeared in the heart of their formation. Isolated ships were attacked from multiple angles, supply lines were cut, and panic spread among the ranks. The Vraks realized that they could no longer dominate the battle through sheer numbers. The humans' unpredictability, speed, and daring had turned the tide, forcing even the most disciplined enemy forces to act defensively instead of offensively. Commander Royce directed a final series of coordinated strikes, targeting the central Vrax command vessels. The human ships, with their allies following closely, pierced the heart of the enemy formation, causing chaos, confusion, and destruction. Every Vrax ship that fell created openings for more attacks, and momentum swung completely to the Allied side. Once paralyzed fleets now surged forward, confident in their ability to fight and win. The Vrax attempted desperate maneuvers to regroup, but their strategies were no longer effective. Every move they made was countered, every plan anticipated. They were losing not just ships, but control, morale, and cohesion. The Allied fleets, guided by the humans, exploited every mistake, pressing forward relentlessly and pushing the once dominant Vrax into retreat. The Thalari ambassador watched with amazement. "They have done what we thought impossible," she said. Her words echoed the sentiment of everyone in the room. Hope, once a fragile spark, now blazed brightly. The humans had not just joined the battle, they had led it, reshaped it, and inspired an entire armada to believe that victory was possible. On board the human flagship, Commander Royce remained calm, but her crew could sense the change. They had shifted the battle from desperation to opportunity, from fear to courage. Their tactics had broken the enemy's confidence, and now the Allied fleets were fighting as one. Using human guidance, strategy, and example, every pilot, every soldier, and every ship played a role in pushing the Vrax back. As the Vrax began to retreat, the Allied fleets pursued cautiously, ensuring they maintained advantage. Each victory reinforced the new sense of unity and strategy among the aliens. No longer paralyzed by fear, they now fought with purpose. Following human lead had transformed them, and even species that had doubted humanity now respected and trusted them. The human fleet had changed the battle, and in doing so, had changed the very course of the war. The galaxy, once silent and dark under the shadow of the Vrax, now held a flicker of hope. A small, daring species from a blue planet had shown that courage, ingenuity, and audacity could turn the tide even against overwhelming odds. The battle, which had seemed hopeless, now had a future, guided by the humans' fearless example and the courage they inspired in every alien fleet around them. The Vrax Dominion, once confident and unchallenged, now faced a reality they had never expected. Their armada, vast and seemingly invincible, had been disrupted, fractured, and forced into retreat by the unexpected arrival and brilliant tactics of the human fleet. The Allied forces, once cornered and hopeless, now surged forward, coordinated, inspired, and emboldened. Every ship moved with renewed purpose. Every pilot fought with courage they had long thought impossible. Commander Elena Royce directed her fleet with calm authority, eyes scanning the battlefield and calculating each strike. Focus on the flanks. Cut off their retreat paths. Keep pressure constant, she ordered. Her ships moved with precision, dodging enemy fire while striking with pinpoint accuracy. Every maneuver was deliberate, designed to destabilize the Vrax command structure and prevent them from regaining control. The humans had not just entered the battle. They had become the force around which all others rallied. The alien fleets, guided by human strategy, pressed on with renewed determination. Each species contributed its strengths. The Draknor's heavy dreadnoughts absorbed fire and created openings. The Thalari's fast, crystalline ships flanked enemies. The Kalari's organic vessels moved unpredictably to harass Vrax squadrons. Together with the humans, they executed complex maneuvers that the Vrax could not anticipate. The combined fleet operated with a unity that had been impossible before, and the tide of battle shifted decisively. The Vrax tried desperately to regroup, but their confidence was shattered. Command ships were targeted and damaged, isolated units were destroyed, and communication lines were fragmented. They had assumed that the cornered fleets would crumble, but instead, they found themselves under relentless, coordinated attack. Their numerical advantage mattered little when their formations were constantly disrupted, and every move they made was countered with speed and precision. From the Galactic Council flagship, Admiral Takar watched the scene unfold, disbelief giving way to awe. "They have done the impossible," he muttered, his voice rough with emotion. For weeks, hope had been a distant memory. But now, guided by humanity's audacity and skill, the Allied fleets fought not for survival alone, but for victory. The humans had shown them that even the most overwhelming enemy could be challenged with courage, strategy, and unity. Commander Royce's human fleet led a daring strike toward the heart of the Vrax command formation. Using diversionary tactics, flanking maneuvers, and calculated risk, they targeted key vessels that coordinated the enemy's movements. Every hit caused ripple effects, disrupting shields, communications, and weapon systems. The Vrax, unaccustomed to such agile, unpredictable warfare, were forced onto the defensive, struggling to maintain cohesion as their fleets fragmented. The Allied fleets followed the humans' lead, exploiting openings and pressing attacks wherever the Vrax were weakest. Smaller ships darted between massive vessels, distracting and harrying the enemy, while larger ships struck critical points. Each engagement was a carefully choreographed sequence of strikes, counters, and diversions, and the Vrax found themselves unable to respond effectively. For the first time, their supposed dominance was challenged not just by numbers, but by strategy and ingenuity. Explosions flared across the void, lighting up debris fields where enemy ships had collided or been destroyed. The once feared Vrax armada now looked disorganized and vulnerable, their formations broken, their morale shaken. The Allied fleets, inspired by the humans' fearlessness, pressed the advantage, striking decisively and preventing the Vrax from regrouping. The battle was no longer a fight for survival. It had become a campaign for liberation, for reclaiming space that had long been lost. Within the human command vessel, Royce maintained focus, issuing orders calmly as the chaos unfolded. Her crew executed flawlessly, anticipating every enemy move and adjusting in real time. Keep pressure constant. Exploit every weakness. Protect our allies, she commanded. Her leadership inspired not just the humans, but also the alien fleets, who now trusted her judgment and coordinated their attacks around her strategies. Every maneuver, every strike reinforced the momentum that was swinging decisively against the Vrax. The Vrax, seeing the collapse of their once perfect armada, attempted a desperate counterattack, launching waves of fighters and heavy ships to reclaim lost ground. But the humans and allied fleets were ready. Anticipating the counterattack, they had set traps, ready to isolate, divert, and destroy the assaulting units. Each wave of enemy ships was met with precise countermeasures, reducing the impact of the Vrax strike and further eroding their morale. As the battle raged, the tide of victory became increasingly clear. Allied fleets moved in coordinated formations, striking at the fractured enemy, exploiting the weaknesses humans had exposed. The Vrax began to retreat systematically, unable to hold their positions or respond effectively. Their armada, once the terror of the galaxy, had been beaten back by a combination of courage, strategy, and unity, guided by an unexpected, brilliant force from humanity. Finally, the remnants of the Vrax armada withdrew from the Andromeda front, leaving behind the field of battle littered with wrecks and debris. The Allied fleets, exhausted but victorious, regrouped and tended to the wounded. Both alien and human crews shared a rare sense of relief and triumph. They had survived, and more than that, they had won against overwhelming odds. All across the fleet, there was a shared understanding. Humanity had changed the course of the war. Commander Royce transmitted a message to all Allied ships: "We fight together. We survive together." Today, we proved that even the impossible can be overcome. Her voice carried across the comm networks, and every pilot, soldier, and crew member felt the truth in it. This was not just a victory of ships and weapons, but of courage, ingenuity, and unity. The human fleet had shown the galaxy that even the smallest, most underestimated species could shape the outcome of history. In the aftermath, the alien commanders looked at the human fleet with new respect, realizing that hope and determination could rival numbers and firepower. The once lost fleets were no longer trapped or demoralized. They had learned to fight differently, to trust and to act boldly, inspired by humanity's fearless example. Across the stars, the galaxy had witnessed a moment that would be remembered for generations, a turning point in the war against the Vrax. The humans, despite their small numbers, had led the charge, transforming despair into hope, paralysis into action, and fear into courage. They had not only fought brilliantly, but had taught the Allied fleets to fight as one, to believe that victory was possible even against a seemingly unstoppable foe. The galaxy had been changed forever, and for the first time in decades, the shadow of the Vrax no longer loomed as an unchallengeable force. And so, the battle had not merely with survival, but with triumph, guided by the daring, skill, and and spirit of humanity. Their unexpected arrival and brilliant tactics had turned a cornered alliance into victors. The Vraks had been forced to retreat, their aura of invincibility broken, and across the stars, every ship, alien and human alike, celebrated the moment when courage, strategy, and hope had overcome despair.